Stop illegal migrants from entering the country has been made at the Conservative Party conference. That's as latest figures show more than 537 people were intercepted trying to cross the Channel yesterday. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, told the party faithful he's working with international allies to stop the boats.
I've written to all of our ambassadors, all of our high commissioners, and I've instructed each and every one of them to do even more work with the countries in which they represent the UK to help stop the abhorrent trafficking of human lives across the English Channel. Be in no doubt at all, our diplomats will redouble their effort to bring an end to this terrible, terrible injustice.
Earlier, the Tory party chairman used his opening address to take a swipe at Labour.
Have these available at the Conservative shop outside for just £16.99, also online at Conservative.
Waving flip-flops featuring Sir Keir Starmer's face, Greg Hands mocked the Labour leader, suggesting he doesn't have a clear position on issues affecting the country. His comments came just hours after the Prime Minister refused to commit to tax cuts. Rishi Sunak said his focus is on halving inflation because it impacts the poorest the most. On a visit to Burnley, the PM insisted his approach is deeply conservative, saying it's a Thatcherite policy.
The best tax cut that we can deliver right now is to halve inflation. Now, that's something that I'm deeply committed to. It's the first of my 5 priorities. Why? Because that's how we can help people with the cost of living. We just want to put more money in people's pockets. And the best way to do that right now is through halving inflation. And that is a deeply conservative approach to this. And my colleagues understand that. This is what Margaret Thatcher did.
Tax is set to be a key issue over the next 4 days, with more than 30 Tory MPs promising not to support the autumn statement if it contains any hikes. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says they're right to question the PM's tax policies, including inheritance tax.
After 13 years of Conservative government, we end up in a position where even its own MPs are having to campaign against their unfair tax policies. And I think Conservative MPs are quite right to say, how is it that we've got the worst, highest tax burden in 70 years? They should also be asking Rishi Sunak why, instead of thinking about cutting taxes for working people, he's looking to give himself and other super rich people a tax break by cutting a tax that affects 4% of people in this country, a tax cut that would earn him personally £300 million.
A key part of the Windsor framework has come into effect for Northern Ireland, with a new system introduced to move products from Great Britain. Goods which are being transported to the EU will use a red lane, which includes customs declarations, while those bound for Northern Ireland will use a green lane with minimal paperwork and no checks. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Nice to have Lisa with us tonight. She returns in an hour's time. Welcome to what's going to be a very busy Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, the Tories are terrible. But on what planet are Labour the answer? In the big story as they prepare for their last annual conference before the next election, do the Tories have momentum? I'll be asking top Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley live from Manchester. Plus, I'll bring you more on a developing story, which is that the former Home Secretary Priti Patel, in the last few minutes at conference, has backed GB News wholeheartedly. My Mark Meets guest is Boris Johnson's biographer, Sir Anthony Seldon. Should Boris still be in charge? And how will history remember him as a Prime Minister? It might take a 10 with the cost of insuring them now through the roof. The case for electric cars is running out of charge. Plus, with Priti Patel calling Suella Braverman an attention seeker and with the cabinet split over leaving the ECHR, are the Tories in the throes of a major civil war? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable ex-government minister, Anne Widdecombe. We've got tomorrow's front pages at 10:30 sharp with 3 top pundits of pedigree. They haven't been told what to say, and they don't follow the script. Tonight, former Conservative MP and Government Minister Edwina Currie. Trade unionist and broadcaster Andy MacDonald, a brand new star on the show. Andy, welcome. and former Conservative MP and now very active farmer. He's had his hands on a Frisian all afternoon. It's Neil Parish. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, as Liz Truss reaffirms her vision for the economy, can Britain afford tax cuts? And should you convert to your partner's religion when you get married? Plus, the most important part of the show, what is that? It is your emails. They come straight to this, my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. A big 2 hours to come. We've got a brand new director in my ear tonight. He's called Mark. Let's make it memorable. And we start with my big opinion. As they begin their party conference, let's be clear, the Tories are terrible. Their disastrous COVID overreaction, locking the country down 3 times in pursuit of a seasonal respiratory virus, is something for which we are now paying a colossal price. Unfortunate, therefore, that as reported by the excellent Unheard News website this week, the UK Government Health Security Agency has declared, wait for it, there is a lack of strong evidence on the effectiveness of lockdowns, masking and social distancing to reduce COVID-19 transmission. Well done, everyone. Only £500 billion down the drain and a permanently damaged country. Whilst in office, the Tories have printed money, presided over rampant inflation, seen taxes at their highest level in 70 years, and they have allowed the woke capture of our public institutions to normalise ideas like men are women, that our history is shameful, and that everything is racist, including the countryside, mathematics and knitting. There was the debacle of Partygate as the public were ludicrously locked in their homes, whilst decision-makers and policy wonks were guzzling red wine. There was Liz Truss's laudable but poorly executed tax-cutting budget, and a figure in Boris Johnson who, not without his talents, and he did get Brexit done, limped from one self-inflicted crisis to another and demonstrates his financial incontinence to this day with his ongoing support for unbridled net zero policies and HS2. For those dreaming of a Boris Johnson comeback one day, be careful what you wish for. So the country's got problems and the Conservatives have been in power for 13 years. End of. But on what planet are Labour the answer? How will they tackle the eye-watering debt and the ongoing pandemic levels of public spending? The moment they get into power, the trade unions who bankrolled the party will expect pay rises for all, which will reawaken the inflation monster. How will they tackle stifling political correctness and the rise of woke when Keir Starmer will take the knee for any cause, and when he still, to this day, struggles with the idea of what a woman is? Many of his colleagues in the party have been gleefully tweeting in the last few days that plenty of women can have penises. Do you really want 5 years of that? On what planet will Labour tackle our dependence on the international energy market for oil and gas when Keir Starmer announces that he will permit no new oil and gas licences in the North Sea, meaning that tyrants like Vladimir Putin and unscrupulous regimes like Saudi Arabia will hold the whip hand over us for energy supply for the foreseeable future. Starmer's bold idea is a 1970s-style state-sponsored energy business which will gamble taxpayer billions on flaky renewables, which, as Germany has demonstrated over the last decade, is an experiment at best and one that's not going very well. Apparently, Starmer's going to pay for everything with a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. First of all, there already is a windfall tax. And also it's tricky because although I don't like these businesses and they are polluters, we require their partnership to pursue green energy investment. And we need them to maintain our short to medium-term energy supply. As with so much from Starmer, it's a great headline, but with dire real-world consequences. Plus, those windfall taxes will be a drop in the ocean anyway, like the few million that he may get from taxing private schools, making them the domain of the super-rich, furthering inequality and killing aspiration. A family with a moderate income will now be priced out, and kids forced to leave the private sector, and of course they will need to be accommodated in our already crowded public schools. And you, the taxpayer, will be left with the bill. To tax any academic institution which teaches and develops British kids, in my view, is an act of cultural barbarism. It's a crime. On what planet are Labour the answer to the illegal migrant crossings when they block the Rwanda plan and just about every other government measure to tackle the issue? Starmer said on Twitter today that he'll smash the criminal smuggling gangs. Good luck with that. I think you'll find these people are quite mobile, quite sophisticated and quite hard to find. On what planet are Labour the answer to Britain's already bloated and overly expensive failing health service? Again today, he announced the biggest NHS workforce expansion in history. Presumably, more diversity officers. Exactly what you need when you're on a waiting list for cancer treatment. People boast that the NHS is the biggest employer in Europe. That's not a boast. That's proof of its wild inefficiency. And it's going to get bigger under Labour. On what planet are Labour the answer to making a success of Brexit, given that their leader fought to reverse it and has spoken of his keenness to align with multiple EU directives and wants the help of Brussels to tackle the migrant crisis, potentially agreeing a deal to accept a quota of migrants to be agreed with the bloc? The Tories are terrible, but Labour are worse. If you think Keir Starmer is the answer to Britain's problems, you're living on another planet. Well, folks, what do you think? Mark at GBNews.com. I'm delighted to welcome my excellent pundits tonight. Former Conservative MP, Government Minister, broadcaster and best-selling author Edwina Currie. Edwina, lovely to have you in the studio. A brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight, a broadcaster and trade unionist, Andy MacDonald. Hello, Andy. And ex-Tory MP and very active, very, very productive and prolific farmer, Neil Parish. Folks, lots to get through, lots to unpick there, and I want to get to all of you if I can. But, Andy, let me start with you. On what planet are Labour the answer to Britain's problems?
Well, I'd say this planet. I mean, you know, you complain about all these issues, but who's been running the country for the last 13 years? Give the Labour Party a chance. You know, Keir has been a civil servant, well, a public servant almost all his life, serving women and small businesses as a private barrister, and then as Director of Public Prosecutions, he ran one of the country's most important parts of infrastructure, particularly socially. I think he did a good job at that. I think he'd do fantastic if the electorate choose to give him the keys to number 10.
Indeed, but what about those specific issues? So, for example, how is he going to tackle the migrant crisis in a way which will be more effective than what the Tories are doing at the moment, given that Labour have blocked every measure so far?
Well, they haven't blocked anything. You know, they don't have a majority in the House of Commons to block it.
Well, they
may have voted against it.
Yeah, they voted against it.
Well, it's because the Rwanda plan isn't very cost-efficient at all. You know, you talk about the NHS being cost-inefficient. You know, that's tuppence compared to the Rwanda plan, really. I think looking at the negotiations he's having with mainland Europe, the EU and the wider European nations, you know, the conversations need to be had, because where are they coming from? They're coming from France, really. You know, you need to have conversations with the source of our problem, particularly to negotiate. So I think he will have open conversations, which Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and all the other prime ministers failed to do.
Well, Andy raises some quite compelling points there, Edwina, and the simple fact of the matter is the Tories have been in charge for 13 years. We've got almost record levels of taxation, and a country with lots of problems. Labour couldn't do any worse.
Well, let me just remind you, we haven't actually been in power in terms of, you know, the first few years.
You're not going to hide behind the coalition.
But look, when Margaret Thatcher came into power, the key thing that she did, and she realised, was that you have to cut public spending. She took an axe to public spending. That was the precursor to being able to do tax cuts much later. And Rishi, I think, has at last got his head around this with the conversations he started to have about the practicalities of net zero, what's likely to come on HS2, although I've been a supporter of HS2, it's become really bloated and we need to...
Would you axe the second leg north of Birmingham?
I think what we'd like to do in the north of England, bearing in mind that that's where we live, is instead of spending all that money down south, we would very much like to have decent rail services in the north of England, particularly going from coast to coast. And if we got that instead, I think everybody would cheer. But that's about the practicalities of how do you cut the amount of money we're spending and get more more bang for our buck as a result of that. And I think Rishi's got his head on this, and I think he's actually beginning to make real inroads into that.
Neil, many of my viewers and listeners will look at the state of the country at the moment, and when offered the chance of 5 more years of Tory rule, it will be thanks but no thanks.
I think Rishi's done an amazing job because he's picked up the government when, you know, the Liz Truss was a debacle, to be honest, and the, you know, run on the pound and the markets and everything else. And he's turned it right round. The Windsor Agreement is another great thing because when I was in Parliament, spent a lot of time with the problems with food going into Northern Ireland and having to be checked. Now it goes straight into Northern Ireland, only food checked is that going into the Republic. So lots and lots of things going on, inflation being halved, and I actually think he is actually now acting like a Tory Prime Minister. Net zero is a good thing by 2050, but for goodness sake, don't price everybody out of the market with their vans and their cars and hard-working people. And I think suddenly he's reconnecting because the Tory party actually, I believe, very much more represents the working class now, dare I say it, than the Labour does, because I actually think that Keir Starmer, in the end, is an intellectual socialist, a nice guy, but intellectual socialism never works, and it won't work again. So let's get on with what we've got, and I think Rishi's doing a good job.
Well, my pundits are divided. What's your view on this? Are Labour the answer to Britain's problems? Mark at gbnews.com. Coming up next in the big story as they prepare for their last annual conference before the next election, do the Tories have momentum? I'll be asking top Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley live from Manchester. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Are Labour the answer to Britain's problems? That is the topic of my big opinion. Well, a strong reaction on email, mark at gbnews.com. Terry, if Labour get in, the country will be finished. John says anyone who votes Labour or Tory is putting our country in serious danger. Mark says the choice between voting between Labour and the Tories is like having to choose your favourite Cray twin. So many of you are not having either main party. Well, today sees the Tories kicking off party conference season, and Rishi Sunak is now narrowing the polls against Labour following a rethink of net zero policies, robust language on illegal immigration and ending the war on motorists. This is likely to be the final Tory party conference before the next election. So is it the start of a resurgence or the beginning of the end of 13 years of Tory rule? Let's head straight to Manchester now and speak to the brilliant Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley. By the way, this is an article written by Tim for The Spectator. What have the Conservatives done for us? A very worthy question. Tim, good evening and welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. First of all, thank you for letting me drag you out of a bar. Listen, what do you think will be the mood of the party in the next few days? How does the mood feel at the moment?
Well, first of all, you've dragged me out of bed, not out of a bar. I'm not that kind of girl. As for the mood of this conference, the mood is pretty upbeat. Don't forget it's been hit by a rail strike, which has made it difficult for some people to get here. But nonetheless, those who are here are, I think, feeling a bit happier. One, because there seems to be a bit of movement in the polls. And two, because the stuff that Rishi's been coming out with about motoring and about immigration seems to have struck a chord with the voters. I expect that over this conference, Rishi Sunak is going to try to rebrand himself as a sort of consumer champion. And Conservatives will feel happy with that. They'd feel even happier if it were attached to a tax cut. But there is one silvery cloud that lowers over this House, and that is Liz Truss will be talking tomorrow. Remember, this is the first conference since she lost her job. I don't think Tory delegates are sad that she went. The general feeling is that that government cocked up in a big way. But nonetheless, she returns with a message about growth and tax cuts, which will resonate with many members, and she'll be appearing with Jacob Rees-Mogg and Priti Patel.
Yes, is Suella Braverman's strong language on illegal immigration and multiculturalism a help or a hindrance for the Tories, do you think?
According to one poll, something like two-thirds of the voters agree with the message that mass migration is an existential challenge to Britain. So she's probably in touch with how most voters feel about it. Look, I think this issue is important to people, but my feeling is that once we come to the general election, things are going to switch back to the big issues like the NHS, tax and spend, and inflation. So it is an important issue, and it's an example of where, when the Tories are able to put their finger on a culture hot-button issue, the public broadly breaks in their favour. My suspicion is just that that's not what people will be voting on at the next election. They'll be voting on pocketbook issues.
Absolutely right. Rethinking net zero, Tim, a reprieve for petrol and diesel cars, plus perfectly functional boilers, the end of the war on motorists, a lick of paint for deprived towns. Rishi Sunak seems to have found his political voice, doesn't he? He's got some mojo at last.
He does, but let's not forget, I know I'm sounding like a Debbie Downer here just before the conference begins, but let's not forget that in many cases he's actually rolling back stuff that the Tories themselves have done. Britain is still going to do net zero. It's just reversed some of the ambitious targets that Boris Johnson introduced, and which Boris Johnson introduced just as a kind of Brexit dividend. And you'll see the same would be the case on tax if we eventually get a tax cut. That'll be reversing taxes that the Tories have raised. So yes, I agree with you. I think Rishi Sunak has definitely found his message. He wants to be the consumer champion, and we might see the polls move closer, but my feeling is that Labour still have the advantage.
In my big opinion just a few minutes ago, Tim, I said that the Tories are terrible, but Labour are worse. It's my view that Sunak edges it over Starmer as the best CEO for the country. Is a message of competence and being less bad than Labour going to cut through?
I think that is the message, and I think that will cut through with some voters. But of course, it's not just about electing a CEO, is it? And what both sides are lacking is a vision. I mean, it's very kind of you to mention the Spectator piece I wrote about the 13 years of the Tories in power. The extraordinary thing about those 13 years is how unconservative they have been. The state has grown in size, your taxes have gone up, and some services have declined in quality. The Tories were in charge. They have no answer for all of that and for why they have governed really as a continuation of Gordon Brown in so many regards, because they've really become a party of good management. Well, Labour, in order to win, is trying to echo that message. We only find out what Labour's policy is on a matter when they announce they're going to reverse it. Labour doesn't really seem to have a philosophy right now, so it's a competition between two different CEOs. And I guess if it is a choice between that, you might stick with the CEO that you know, Rishi Sunak, but I'd like to see a bit more philosophy. I'd like to see the Tories arguing for freedom and a smaller government, and I'd like to see Labour being honest about wanting to create a more equal society and to share the wealth.
Well, listen, whilst you're there, a developing story from Manchester, Tim. Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, has spoken this evening about GB News and the challenges that we've faced this week. Take a listen.
I also want to welcome some more friends here tonight. Our friends that are here, the newest, most successful, most dynamic, no-nonsense news station, and the defenders of free speech. That is my friends at GB News. Thank you for everything that you do. Just incredible. Honestly, just incredible. Don't look embarrassed. I know you're not shrinking, Violet. Thank you for absolutely everything you do, because, you know, this isn't breaking news, but I think it's fair to say that our country needed a new disruptor when it came to the broadcast media to take on the establishment, the Tory-hating, Brexit-bashing, free speech deniers at the BBC and the so-called mainstream media.
Well, there you go, Tim Stanley. GB News finds itself this week at the very heart of the culture wars.
Yeah. Look, my mother watches GB News from dawn till dusk, mostly to see if she can catch a glimpse of Patrick Christie's. As for myself, I think that people who don't like GB News fall into two categories. One is people who haven't watched it recently. They don't realise how its quality has improved since its launch and that it's now a really serious rolling news channel. And the other group is people who have seen it and they're worried because they can see that it's a threat to their own ratings. I think some of what's happened in the last few days, the GB News has responded maturely and sensibly to the thing that went on, that we shall not discuss, but I think people have jumped on that as an opportunity to shoot down a rival, and I think most viewers can see through that and will remain loyal.
Do check out Tim Stanley's brilliant Spectator column this week and his weekly column in the Telegraph newspaper. Tim, enjoy conference and we'll catch you soon. My thanks to Tim Stanley. Coming up with tonight's pundits, as Liz Truss reaffirms her vision for the economy at conference, can Britain actually afford tax cuts? And should you convert to your partner's religion when you get married? I'll be asking my pundits both of those hot topics. Plus, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we have been asking, are Labour the answer to Britain's problems? We'll get the results of that very shortly. Lots to get through. Don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are Labour the answer to Britain's problems? A big reaction on email. Mark, God help us if Labour get into power. This great country will become a third world country, says Charlie. Kevin says Keir Starmer wants to take us back into Europe. A big no. And Nick says, hi, Mark, great monologue, but it didn't go far enough. I have voted Labour my entire adult life and was a card-holding, fee-paying member until about 2 years ago. I'm one of the many who refused to accept the increased dictatorship that is Labour under Starmer's leadership. He goes on to say that various individuals within the movement are being silenced on a growing list of topics. He says, where once Labour was a broad church, it's now easier for members to face expulsion for the most minor disagreement with the Starmerite rule. So there you go. Nick not happy there. Not a happy Labour supporter. OK, folks, it's time for a bit of a poll result. Earlier today, we asked you, as Liz Truss reaffirms her vision for the economy, can Britain afford tax cuts? The results are in, tax cuts. And the answer is yes, Britain can afford those tax cuts. 67.8% say yes, 32.2% say no. Well, let's ask my pundits. Edwina Currie, former Conservative MP and Minister. Andy MacDonald, trade unionist and broadcaster, and former Conservative MP and farmer Neil Parish. So Rishi Sunak is indeed facing a mounting revolt from Tory MPs demanding tax cuts, which has been spearheaded by his predecessor Liz Truss. 33 Conservative MPs have signed letters warning Sunak that they will not support tax rises. So can Britain afford these tax cuts, Neil?
Well, if we can actually control some of the public spending, then we can actually make some tax cuts. I think the problem with Liz Truss was she was talking about the tax cuts and not the public spending not the public spending cuts. So I think if you're going to do anything, the corporation tax has got to be a good one. Republic of Ireland's got a lower corporation tax rate than ours. That's where we've got to target, I think. Any money that we've got is for that. And then as we move towards the election, if there's some personal taxation that can be reduced, all the very better. But of course, when you have put up interest rates, not only do you as individuals have to pay more, the country has to pay more for servicing its debt. And that's the problem in a way. We've spent so much over the last few years with COVID, the energy crisis and all of these things. The debt interest is what's stymieing the Chancellor. But I think they're going to have to break out and actually give some tax cuts and some stimulation. But like I said, they can't go the Liz Truss total sensible route, because otherwise they shake the markets. But I think there is room for manoeuvre there, but not much.
Edwina, you've always been fiscally prudent. Can Britain afford tax cuts?
Not at the moment, despite what the poll says. The poll is not can they, but, oh, please, can we have some tax cuts?
Wishful thinking.
And yes, wishful thinking would be lovely. I think probably this autumn statement is going to be the most boring on record, because there's going to be no tax cuts and no tax increases either.
Right.
Because, in fact, the tax take is increasing as the economy grows. The tax take tends to increase. I don't agree with Neil entirely about businesses. Businesses have not contributed very much, and most countries that we are competing with contribute a lot more to the tax take than businesses in the United Kingdom, including a heck of a lot more to the social security and the costs of looking after the least well-off, that sort of thing. So, no, I think probably we're going to get a long speech from Mr Hunt that says absolutely nothing, and we'll probably get a version of it at the party conference as well.
Anyone that wants tax cuts under Labour can go whistle, can't they?
Oh, not necessarily. I'm sure that, you know, the economy's always evolving. I'd say just on the point
but
about...
Labour don't believe in low taxes, do they?
Oh, they do, dependent on the economy. Not when, you know, the economy's a bit of a mess. You know, public spending needs to be, you know, sorted. There needs to be reforms.
We've never had low taxes under Labour, ever.
Well, I disagree. I think if you look at the...
gone up,
if you look at the later stage, if you look at the later stage of the Blair government, I think they did take down taxes.
Including the top rate was at 40%, Edwina.
But I think if you look at that point about corporation tax, London's just been named the second best financial city in the world, second to only New York. So I don't think we really need to slash it, because we're doing pretty well, and we're climbing on New York at that. But I think if we're looking at cutting taxes, you've got to cut public spending. You can't just have one without the other. That was, apart from a major communications failure, that was one of the big failures of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget.
So do you think when the time was right, what taxes would Labour cut?
I've got no idea. I think it'd depend on how the first 18 months of them governing would go. You know, 18 months before COVID, you couldn't have predicted that.
I think the DNA of Labour is not tax cutting. The DNA of Labour is to spend more, bigger state, and actually take more from the individual. Now, we Tories have actually got to get back to the state where actually we give money back to individuals. I think Edwina Curry is absolutely right about the boring budget this autumn, but I suspect something next spring, dare I say it, when the economy will have improved and the Chancellor may well have a little more leg room then, because they will need to actually give a stimulus both to the individual and to companies, because I'm not going to accept that we is entirely her argument. It's back companies, you back employment, and you drive the economy.
The clever thing will be to get the tax cuts at a time when the economy is growing, but it's not going to fuel inflation. Because we're all, anyone that's lived through, you're too young, but anyone that's lived through the time...
Well, I'm the one that will have to carry the brunt of the economy.
Margaret Thatcher had to get inflation down as well as public spending.
Margaret Thatcher, you know, I'm seeing the brunt of that. Her housing targets at the time, they were great at the time, but I'm having to deal with that now because there's no houses left, and the ones that are way too expensive.
I don't think the Labour spokesman can actually do much on housing when Keir Starmer has voted down the idea of actually building more houses.
I'm not a Labour spokesman. Let's make that very clear. I think you're overstating my importance a touch.
Exactly.
I think it's ironic for you to speak. You were a member of the governing party over the last 13 years. This failure of a Tory government. I think it's bold for you to speak about anything and accuse me of saying, oh, well, you can't talk because of your record. You were an elected member. And honestly, the government has failed.
But you're also saying that Labour has a policy on housing. I'm not convinced that
you're the only one that said that Labour has a policy on housing.
Keir Starmer on Twitter today announced that he will build more houses. He's going to cut through red tape to make it happen, the houses that working Brits need.
Oh, my goodness, OK. And he's going to do them where? In the south of England? That's going to bring him an awful lot of votes. And I don't think, I love hearing you talk. I would never stop you, because every time you speak, you demonstrate exactly why we tend to have more Tory governments than Labour governments.
Now, how do you substantiate that?
Thank you, Edwina.
Sounds quite harsh there. I mean, it's his first time on the show, Edwina.
I think maybe the current opinion polls would say that we're about to have another Labour government.
No. The lead is going...
Well, to be fair, you know, the state of the last 13 years, it had to bottom out at some point. They had to start coming back. But I think the average is still 17 points.
And it goes back to it, Edwina, that the taxes have risen under a Conservative government. That's a point that Andy could fairly make, isn't it?
We've had a horrible time with COVID. I agree with much of what you said. I'm sure if anything like that happened again, we would not go into lockdown because of the damage it's done to school children, the damage it's done to the economy. But the fact is, it's done. and we can't rewind it. The cost has been enormous. Actually, a lot of that's got to be paid for.
There you go. Look, folks, as you've seen from my brilliant pundits tonight, Mark Dolan tonight is the home of diverse opinion. What is yours? Mark at gbnews.com. Can Britain afford tax cuts? Now, finding someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with is wonderful. Of course it is, but it doesn't come without compromise. One woman who recently got proposed to said she would only say yes if he converted to her religion. It's a story which has broken the internet over the last 24 hours, with people arguing on both sides. So should you convert to your partner's religion when you get married? Edwina?
Well, when I got married for the first time back over 50 years ago, my family wouldn't accept my fiancé because he wasn't the right religion. So I said to my fiancé, so what would your parents want? And he said they would like us to get married in our local church. So I said, fine. And we had a reading from the book of Ruth. Whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy gods shall be my gods.
It's wonderful.
And we meant it. You know, when I got married for the second time, I said to my mum, you're coming this time. And she did.
So therefore you compromised in favour of your partner rather than him compromising?
Because his family were being tolerant of me, and my family were not being tolerant of him.
It was the original Mr. Curry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that right? Did he consider converting to your religion?
Well, he went to ask my dad for my hand in marriage. That shows you how long ago it was. And came back kind of white and shaking and said, you were right. He's not going to accept me. He says, I'm wonderful, except I'm not the right religion. At which point we walked off hand in hand into the heart of Liverpool, and we had the conversation I've just told you.
What do you think about this, Andy?
Well, I think it's down to each relationship, each individual, really. You know, us sitting on the GB News sofa, we don't have an insight into every single relationship across this country. So I think if they're in a situation where they're comfortable to do that, more power to them. But if not, nobody should be forced.
If you were to fall in love with somebody that was particularly religious and that was a red line for them, a deal breaker, would you convert?
I wouldn't, no.
Interesting. How about you, Neil?
Yeah, no, I think it's up to the individual again, and I think the relationship, and I think it puts an awful strain on relationships where very religious families lock horns over it. And I mean, the only difference between Sue and I was a Methodist and Sue was Church of England, so we just about managed to sort of tolerate that. But you know, seriously, I think when you've got a real problem with the families, then I think it's probably less so. But in some religions, there will still be very, very strong opinions, and I think it's a shame because you know, young people when they're in love, it's great that they can get together and get married. It's a shame that they have this sort of extra pressure put on them, and I think sometimes very good relationships can be destroyed by families. And really, you know, I think in the 21st century, hopefully, we should let our children, you know, our daughters had various boyfriends they haven't particularly approved of. But, you know, it's her choice and she gets on with it. And then, luckily, another one comes along. But seriously, you know, I think it's a shame when families do dictate, because it comes more from the families in a way than it does from the individuals.
It can indeed. Well, look, coming up in my take at 10, with the cost of insuring them now through the roof, with some people paying £5,000 a year, the case for electric cars is running out of charge. Edwina won't be happy, she's got a Tesla. But first, my Mark Meets guest is Boris Johnson's biographer, Sir Anthony Seldon. Should Boris still be in charge? And how will history remember him as a Prime Minister? That's next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7pm.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are Labour the answer to Britain's problems? Emails are coming in thick and fast on this. Mark at gbnews.com. Steve says, Mark, you can't trust either party. Reform UK might be a better shout. We'll keep those emails coming. It's time now for this. Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, and a man that can only be described as a polymath, given his extraordinary career as an educator, broadcaster, biographer and historian, Sir Anthony Seldon. He's the former headmaster of Wellington College, ex-vice-chancellor of the University of Buckingham, and the founder of the Wellington Academy, the first state school to carry the name of its founding independent school. He's authored and edited more than 45 books on contemporary history, politics and education, including major biographies of John Major, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. His latest tome is all about Boris Johnson. It's called Johnson at Number 10, The Inside Story, which he co-wrote with Raymond Newell. Sir Anthony Seldon, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Boris Johnson clearly has a brain on him and oodles of charisma, but what does your book tell us about his character and temperament?
I can't hear.
Oh, Sir Anthony, you can't hear me. I might have to do some mime for you. Are you hearing me now? We're going to fix that. You see, it's live telly, folks, isn't it? That's what you like about GB News, a little bit of unexpected drama. Listen, let's get to more of your emails, because I've been asking whether Britain can afford tax cuts. Yes, we have to afford tax cuts in order to achieve growth, says Patrick. Andrew says, hi, Mark and the team. I think Rishi Sunak would get a big boost by trying to stem the war in Ukraine. Nobody's talking about peace. Let Rishi be a statesman and stand up and ask for peace talks. This could boost his world status and get the oil price down, reducing inflation. Andy, thank you for that. I'm delighted to say that Sir Anthony is back with us. Sir Anthony, forgive the technical glitch there. In regards to your latest biography on Boris Johnson, he clearly has a brain on him and oodles of charisma. But what does your book tell us about his character and temperament?
That he had the potential. He was there at moments of great historical significance. Brexit, one of the biggest decisions any British government has made since 1945. COVID, the biggest health epidemic for 100 years. A war in Ukraine, possibly leading to the Third World War, and a landslide general election victory to the Conservatives. I mean, whatever it wasn't a boring premiership. The question is, he's a superb campaigner. We know that. He's very good at winning elections. That doesn't always mean that the skills you need to win elections give you the character to be a governor. And once you're in Downing Street, you need to be good at governing, good at administration, good at consistency. And that was his downfall.
Indeed. Does his stint in number 10 feel like a lost opportunity?
Well, I think Brexit, he will be remembered as the person more than anyone who made Brexit happen amongst the politicians. Obviously, Nigel Farage is more important out there in the country, but at the very top of politics, he was the man who decided to join Vote Leave and tipped a close referendum in favour of Vote Leave and away from Remain. The question is, has he done enough to justify Brexit? Did he have a real plan to reap the Brexit dividend? With COVID, did he do enough to provide the consistent leadership? We've just been hearing it debated there. Did he go in too much with those who wanted lockdowns? Did he have the brain to see a way through it? And with the general election landslide, that people didn't think that he could win. He did win it, but did he do enough with it? And why, within 2.5 years of winning that landslide of 80, was the Tory party ripping itself apart and wanting him to go? So those, I think, are the fascinating questions. I mean, it is an amazing premiership.
Do you imagine that he craves a return to number 10?
Yeah, because his whole character, he loves the limelight. He wants to be the biggest person in the room. He wants the focus to be on him. He's not somebody who likes being locked away in a hut in the Cotswolds. His happiest moment, he told one of his closest aides, came in the 2012 Olympics held in London, when he got up on the stage and he had 50,000 people shouting Boris. He absolutely loves that. And that's not uncommon. It's what drives many people to want to become Prime Minister and to remain as Prime Minister, that adulation. You could see why he loved Zelensky, because Zelensky had it, and why he admired Churchill, because Churchill was the saviour of the nation. That's the kind of role that Boris Johnson would have craved, but that wasn't the historical moment for him. So yes, I'm sure he'd like to come back, as Churchill did, at some point in the future, and no one can rule that out. Will Trump come back? There's probably as big a chance of Trump coming back as Johnson. Who knows? This is a very volatile time for the Conservative Party. What does the Conservative Party believe in now? So it's not going to happen before the general election. After the general election, anything is possible.
How do you anticipate the outcome of the next election, Sir Anthony? Oh, I think we might have lost the line there. Can you hear me, sir? He might have just lost the line again. Apologies for that, a couple of technical glitches. What an interesting guy, Sir Anthony Seldon, one of the country's most esteemed educators, former headmaster, former vice-chancellor at the University of Buckingham. Let's catch up on some more of your emails now before we get to the break. Are Labour the answer to Britain's problems is something that we've been debating in response to my Big Opinion monologue, which you can now catch up with on Twitter at GBNews. A vote for Starmer is a vote for Tony Blair, who will be pulling the strings, says Martin. Jane, quite excited to see images of Boris Johnson there in my interview with Sir Anthony Sheldon. Hi, Mark. Bring Boris back. He knew what to do and was stabbed in the back for his popularity. He could bring the country back to how we need it. He knew what people wanted. I've got to say, there are plenty of people that do miss Boris Johnson. So in terms of a glorious return to number 10, never say never. OK, lots more to come in the 10 o'clock hour. I'm afraid to say that the case for electric cars is beginning to run out of charge. What's your view? Do you own an electric car? Mark at gbnews.com. Plus tomorrow's papers hot off the press with live reaction from tonight's top pundits. All of that plus your emails. So get the kettle on and I'll see you shortly.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's coming up to 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight in a developing story. Speaking at Tory party conference, of course, probably their last conference before the next election, ex-Home Secretary Priti Patel, one of the most experienced politicians in the country, has given her official backing to the People's Channel, GB News. More on that very shortly. But if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. A busy hour to come in my take at 10. With the cost of insuring them now through the roof, the case for electric cars is running out of charge. With Priti Patel calling Suella Braverman an attention seeker, and with the cabinet split over leaving the ECHR, and with Liz Truss calling for tax cuts, are the Tories in the throes of a civil war? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable ex-government minister, Anne Widdecombe. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction from my top pundits. So a packed show, lots to get through. But first, here's the news with Lisa Hartle.
I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. A promise to increase efforts to stop illegal migrants from entering the country has been made at the Conservative Party conference. That's as the latest figures show more than 537 people were intercepted trying to cross the Channel yesterday. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, told the party faithful he's working with international allies to stop the boats.
I've written to all of our ambassadors, all of our high commissioners, and I've instructed each and every one of them to do even more work with the countries in which they represent the UK to help stop the abhorrent trafficking of human lives across the English Channel. Be in no doubt at all, our diplomats will redouble their effort to bring an end to this terrible, terrible injustice.
Earlier, the Tory party chairman used his opening address to take a swipe at Labour, waving.
I have these available at the Conservative shop outside for just £16.99, also online.
Waving flip-flops featuring Sir Keir Starmer's face, Greg Hands mocked the Labour leader, suggesting he doesn't have a clear position on issues affecting the country. His comments came just hours after the Prime Minister refused to commit to tax cuts. Rishi Sunak said his focus is on halving inflation because it impacts the poorest the most. On a visit to Burley, the PM insisted his approach is deeply conservative, saying it's a Thatcherite policy.
The best tax cut that we can deliver right now is to halve inflation. Now, that's something that I'm deeply committed to. It's the first of my 5 priorities. Why? Because that's how we can help people with the cost of living. We just want to put more money in people's pockets. And the best way to do that right now is through halving inflation. And that is a deeply conservative approach to this. And my colleagues understand that. This is what Margaret Thatcher did.
Tax is set to be a key issue over the next 4 days, with more than 30 Tory MPs promising not to support the autumn statement if it contains any hikes. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says they're right to question the PM's tax policies, including inheritance tax.
After 13 years of Conservative government, we end up in a position where even its own MPs are having to campaign against their unfair tax policies. And I think Conservative MPs are quite right to say, how is it that we've got the worst, highest tax burden in 70 years? They should also be asking Rishi Sunak why, instead of thinking about cutting taxes for working people, he's looking to give himself and other super rich people a tax break by cutting a tax that affects 4% of people in this country, a tax cut that would earn him personally £300 million.
A key part of the Windsor framework has come into effect for Northern Ireland, with a new system introduced to move products from Great Britain. Goods which are being transported to the EU will use a red lane, which includes customs declarations, while those bound for Northern Ireland will use a green lane with minimal paperwork and no checks. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
My thanks to Lisa. Get my glasses on. We're ready for a busy hour. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, with Priti Patel calling Suella Braverman an attention seeker, with the cabinet split over leaving the ECHR, and with Liz Truss calling for tax cuts. Are the Tories in the throes of a major civil war? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable ex-government minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus, I'll be asking Anne her memories of Tory party conference when she was a top minister. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Former Tory MP and ex-cabinet minister Edwina Currie, trade unionist and broadcaster, a brand new star on the show Andy MacDonald, and ex-Tory MP and farmer Neil Parish. They'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day as well. Don't forget, those papers are coming, but first, my take at 10. If something doesn't seem right to you, if it doesn't add up, if it doesn't make sense, That's probably because it isn't right, it doesn't add up, and it doesn't make sense. We live in an era now where you're supposed to ignore the obvious glaring realities of life. We're told that printing billions of pounds is cost-free and won't cause inflation. We're told a flimsy mask, standing 6 feet apart or leaving the pub an hour early will stop a respiratory virus. We're told that segregation and focusing on skin colour will somehow stop racism when that used to be considered the very cause of racism. We're told you can change your biological sex and that a man born without breasts can breastfeed, and that he should participate in female sport and be accommodated in a woman's prison if she, her, has been a naughty girl. I could go on, you know how mad the world has become. But in these troubled times, we've got to swallow this stuff, and if we decide to call it out, to draw attention to reality, or even just to quote data, we're a bad person. We're guilty of misinformation, and we should shut up and go away. I think this quote from George Orwell pretty nicely sums it up. He famously wrote, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." Which takes me to electric cars. You have to make quite the mental leap to take the view that electric cars are good for the environment. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that petrol and diesel gas guzzlers are good either, absolutely not. But to say that manufacturing a new Tesla is somehow good for the planet compared to keeping a 10-year-old Volkswagen Passat that you've already got is plain ridiculous. Frankly, it's taking the Passat. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Has it not occurred to anyone that these electric cars, replacing perfectly functional petrol and diesel cars that already exist, require a massive amount of energy to be produced? All of the metal, all the plastic, all of the rubber. The factories that make them, the shipping of these cars around the world, and then there are the batteries. Useless after a few years and financially ruinous to replace. One chap I know was quoted £13,000 for a new battery on the Nissan Leaf. These batteries are wildly toxic, extraordinarily polluting and hard to recycle. There are people still driving around in 20 and 30-year-old cars quite happily. Well, that's not possible with electric vehicles, so you're looking at buying a new one every few years. That's more production, more factories, more resources, more pollution. The batteries themselves are comprised of precious, finite minerals, which will run out. People rightly draw attention to the horrors of slavery in the past, but no one seems to be giving a flying Ford Fiesta about current, ongoing slavery, with children and teenagers standing in freezing mud in the Congo for up to 12 hours a day, mining for the lithium that goes into the electric cars that you drive around in London or Manchester that make you feel like such a good person. Electric cars are far more expensive than petrol and diesel cars, so the ideology of net zero once again punishes the poorest in our society. Don't forget, Sky News presenters think that poor people don't drive cars at all. Get out of London, dear. You might learn a thing or two. You can't use the heater or air conditioning without running the battery down on these things. Where are the charging points? And then, of course, there is the famous range anxiety, where anything other than a trip to your local Tesco's is consumed with the abject terror that you won't make it. Even The Guardian offer a note of scepticism in their paper this weekend, with drivers who ditched petrol and diesel cars to help save the planet facing huge prices in insurance premiums, with one chap that they interviewed, who'd previously paid around £1,000 a year to insure his Tesla, was sent a quote for £5,000 and told to like it or lump it. These cars are expensive to repair, particularly after a collision. They're heavy, which is bad news for multi-storey car parks. And on the rare occasions that the battery can explode and the extra weight causes higher emissions from the braking and the rubber shredded from the tyres, you have to wonder, what is the point? This is me and my Prius. It's an old car, but it still works. Why can't we have one of those? This push for electric cars is ideological. They have a role to play, absolutely, but the crazy rush to get everyone into electric cars by a week next Thursday doesn't add up, environmentally or economically. It's time to pull the plug on this failed experiment of electric vehicles. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.com. I'll get to your emails shortly, but first let's hear from tonight's top pundits. Edwina Currie, ex-Conservative MP, former government minister, Andy McDonald, a trade unionist, and Neil Parish, former Conservative MP. I'd better start with you, Edwina, because you own a Tesla.
Yeah, I'm on my second Tesla, and I have to say, Mark, I've never heard you so unadventurous. My goodness, if a Prius is the limit of your ambition and style, you know, I feel a little bit sorry for you. Much of what you say is right, but much of what you say is wrong. Apart from anything else, I save a lot of money having a Tesla instead of having an ordinary car, a petrol or diesel car. Mine will do something like 350 miles on one charge. I charge it mostly at home, and I get my electricity from, I won't say which company, but it does it through renewables and all the rest of it, so that I'm trying to be as green as possible. But it's a beautiful car. There are other electric cars that are very good, and I accept that there's a problem with batteries. There is a business case for somebody to get involved in recycling the batteries and making a lot of money, but it's not happening yet. And it may well be that in the end we'll have hydrogen cars rather than electric cars. But for the time being, I love my Tesla, and it puts a lot of money in my pocket over the course of a year.
However, Edwina has let the cat out of the bag, Andy McDonald. She's had 2 Teslas in recent years. That's the problem with these electric cars. You have to keep replacing them.
Yeah, well, exactly. I don't quite know how one goes through 2 Teslas. I thought they were cars for life as they're advertised.
Well, yeah, I mean, Andy, you know about 2 Jags Prescott. It's 2 Teslas Currie, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The hypocrisy is there.
Not at the same time.
By the way, can I also say it's two tractors Parish?
Yes, but not electric ones.
So, Andy, what do you think? I mean, look, I think that electric cars have a role, but I think this ideological push to go electric, it strikes me as counterproductive.
I actually agree with you, Mark, surprisingly. I think there isn't the infrastructure there physically. You know, the charging points aren't really there for any company apart from Tesla. I think also the more important thing is there's not the social infrastructure. Across the Midlands, the North, people are happy to pick up a 1200, dinger, drive it around for a couple of years and then bin it off and, the cycle continues. I don't think that with the kind of price of current electric vehicles, hybrids are making some inroads. Toyotas are great. Of course, other cars are available. But I think the social infrastructure needs to be there. They need to keep working on the technology because there definitely is a place for it. But it just needs to get that price point down to what a normal working class family or individual can afford.
For sure, but I'm not even convinced, Neil Parish, by the environmental case for electric cars.
I think there is a place for electric car, but I think the idea of putting back diesel and petrols to 2035 was absolutely right, because you then create a second-hand market also in electric cars, so people with lower incomes can afford them. And I think hydrogen will come in as well, especially for heavier vans, lorries, tractors. All of those things will be hydrogen and not electric. I think we have put too much of our apples in one particular, or eggs in one particular basket with the electrics. And where we do have to be careful is the way many of these battery ingredients are mined across the world, child labour and goodness knows what. So, we do have to be careful. We become a little bit simplistic over it. But as far as emissions are concerned, and if you're in an inner city, then there's no doubt electric cars have a real, and outside schools, all of these places, absolutely fine. But of course, you've got to remember also, if you go to the rural areas and to the rural towns, much more difficult to have electric, especially with a lot of miles. And of course, we've got to be absolutely we've got to be absolutely certain that, but also it mustn't be a preserve either, Edwina, of the middle class. And that's where it is. No, sorry, it's not. Because if you want to run your businesses, your white vans, all of these things where you want them to be electric or hydrogen, they've also got to be able to afford it. So therefore, it's not a case of just those that can afford them can have them. So let's make sure it's a broad-based policy. And so that's why putting it back to 25, giving more time and getting a second-hand market will work very well for
Edwina, look straight down the barrel and make your final case for electric cars.
Well, I love my car. The reason I'm on my second is because we moved from a large one to a smaller one, and it goes... My car will beat your car any time, let me tell you.
Well, indeed, look, saying it's gorgeous is not an argument. You're gorgeous, Edwina. But you're a woman of substance too. Where's the substance in electric cars? You haven't addressed any of my criticisms.
Well, I have indeed, in several ways. One is it actually saves me a lot of money. I'm not putting petrol or diesel in week after week after week. It saves me thousands of pounds a year. The second is it's a beautiful car. It's quiet, it's silent, it's extremely comfortable. It's very fast if I want it to be. I can beat any of you.
And Edwina, have you added in the car's depreciation? That'll be interesting, because then you'll find it's nowhere near as economic as you believe it to be.
I didn't bother about that when I had a Mercedes.
Well, listen, I've got to say, I think that Edwina's Tesla will go for a fortune because it's owned by a celebrity. Listen, lots more to come. Listen to this, with Priti Patel calling Suella Braverman an attention seeker, with the cabinet split over leaving the ECHR, and with Liz Truss calling for tax cuts. Are the Tories in the throes of a civil war? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable ex-government minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus tomorrow's front pages with instant reaction from tonight's top pundits. Anne Widdecombe is next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark says, John, what is the point of a second-hand electric car as the batteries are useless? I've got to say, none of you at the moment are having electric cars, but keep those emails coming. I'll catch up with them at 10:30. But it's time now for the newsmaker. And following her bold speech in the United States about illegal immigration and the failure of multiculturalism, Suella Braverman has faced an unlikely backlash from her predecessor in the Home Office, Priti Patel, who, in an interview this weekend, labelled Braverman an attention seeker. This as tensions grow within the Cabinet about whether the UK should leave the European Convention on Human Rights in order to tackle illegal crossings in the Channel. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister Liz Truss will be lobbying colleagues at conference this week, pushing for the Prime Minister to cut taxes and to go for growth. So is this a sign of healthy debate within the party or the beginnings of a civil war? Let's get the views of tonight's newsmaker, former Conservative government minister, author and television personality Anne Widdecombe. Anne, welcome to the show. You've seen your fair share of Tory infighting over the years. Is there trouble brewing within the party, do you think?
Oh, good heavens, it's not brewing. It's already been there for a very long time. And just look at what we're now, almost taking for granted, that a former Home Secretary can actually say of her successor that she is an attention seeker. Now, I can remember a time not so very long ago, you don't have to go back into the depths of history. Why, the tradition was that former occupants of office, including prime ministers, did not attack their successors on their own side. You'd obviously attack successors on the other side. Now, this is so normal that, nobody is really commenting on it. I mean, we've had civil war in the Tory party now for a very long time. I mean, what was all the fuss about Truss? Answer: a war between the parliamentary party and the party in the country. They wanted different prime ministers. And the party in Westminster finally won. We've got no discipline there at all, none. And the nation can see it. And when we look and we want a government to be solving things, all we hear is talk. I have to say of Suella, I don't think she's an attention seeker. I think she's a quite hopeless waffler. She talks and talks and talks about what she's going to do, and she delivers absolutely nothing. She talks about those boats until I'm sick of actually hearing her say the word boats, but she does nothing. And it reminds me, the old verse from history, a toast unto our sovereign Lord, whose word no man relies on. He never said a foolish thing and never did a wise one. Suella Braverman talks wisely, she does nothing.
Well, you speak with authority and you know the Home Office inside out. Is ditching the ECHR the final card that Rishi Sunak has up his sleeve? Might that move the dial for the government in terms of how seriously they're taken in their efforts to stop the boats?
Well, I mean, if he actually did leave ECHR, then yes, I think that would make an enormous difference. He's not going to. He's going to say that's what he's going to do. It'll probably appear as a promise in the manifesto. And then he's going to say, but there are so many difficulties. Exactly what he's done over Rwanda. The idea that we leave ECHR without substantial legal challenge is a nonsense. And he's shown no ability to get to grips with it when he's in that situation. So, he may say that he's going to do that. And there will be a section of his party that doesn't like that. And so once again, we'll all be sitting there watching them fighting amongst themselves. But he's not actually going to achieve it, Mark. And frankly, the only thing that will get him re-elected is if he has a record of achievement. And he doesn't. He simply doesn't.
And you are a veteran of many Conservative Party conferences, many of your speeches very memorable. What are your recollections of this event over the years?
Well, of course, my recollections vary according to what stage I was at in the political cursus honorum. And when you're young and you're going to conference, you stay up half the night. I missed the Brighton bomb by 20 minutes. You stay up half the night and you're trying to make contacts and you're trying to advance your career. And above all, you want to speak. You really want to speak. And of course, that's not so easy if you're one of several thousand, which is what it used to be in its heyday. So I can remember all that rivalry, all that jostling for position, all those efforts to speak. And then, of course, time goes on and you get into Parliament and then you become a minister. And then, of course, you're making speeches from the platform. And I was phenomenally blessed because by the time I was making speeches from the platform, we were in opposition. We were early in opposition, and I could say what I liked. When you're in government, you can't.
Indeed. Did you witness any naughtiness over the years at conference? Any dramatic moments?
Well, the bomb was pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
And I can vividly remember the conference where Cecil Parkinson had some problems. Yeah. And there was that was the talk of the party at the time. I can remember all those sorts of things. But on the whole, in those days, we took conference seriously. We were at the seaside, of course. You're not now. You're in Manchester or somewhere miserable. But we were at the seaside, and we were there for 5 days. Now it's all crushed into about 2.5 days. We could put down motions which disagreed with party policy. We could put them down, and we did. And it was a much more democratic, exciting conference. I mean, now it is a set piece. That's all it is. It's a set piece. And frankly, it's as boring as most of the speakers are.
Well, you don't do boring, Anne, and we look forward to catching up in a week's time. My thanks to former government minister, veteran of Tory party conference, Anne Widdecombe. Coming up, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. Don't go anywhere.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, look, I'm very excited because the Tory party conference has started. I love all of the conferences, Lib Dem, Labour and Conservative, because I am the ultimate politics nerd, so I'm interested. I hope you are too. And something very interesting happened at conference this evening. The former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, one of the most experienced politicians in the country, has been speaking about GB News. Take a listen.
I also want to welcome some more friends here tonight. Our friends that are here, the newest, most successful, most dynamic, no-nonsense news station, and the defenders of free speech. That is my friends at GB News. Thank you for everything that you do.
There you go. We've got the backing of Priti Patel, and I know that we've got the backing of you, our many, many viewers and listeners. So if you're enjoying the show, if you're enjoying the channel, tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. Now, this show is very much about your feedback. The emails are coming in thick and fast. mark@gbnews.com. Are the Tories in the throes of a civil war? Ken says infighting in the Tory party has become a national joke. Perhaps those MPs who can't or won't follow the party and government policies should stop their carping and join the Labour Party, as they're obviously not true Conservatives. Also, are electric cars all they're cracked up to be? That was the topic of my Take at 10 just a few minutes ago. Elaine says, hi, Mark. Electric cars are this century's Betamax recorders, only way more expensive. Anyone else, like me, old enough to remember the Betamax? Many people rushed out and bought the new Betamax, only to find the arrival of VHS video recorders overnight, rendering their Betamax machines useless. And Magnus says, hi, Mark, would you buy a second-hand petrol or diesel car if you knew that you'd have to re-engine it? Of course, referring there to the fact that the batteries do take some replacing. However, Matthew disagrees with me, and he says, hi, Mark, wouldn't the person who wishes to change their 10-year-old Passat be buying a new or newer petrol diesel if they weren't buying a new or newer EV, which also uses a lot of energy and resources, so making no net difference? Matt, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming, mark@gbnews.com. It is just gone 10:30. It's time for these. Papers, and we start with the Sun newspaper. After backing Ukraine, Russian hackers attack the royals. Cyber blitz crashes palace website. Russian cyber criminals targeted the royal family today, days after King Charles's condemnation of the Ukraine war. Pro-Putin hacktivist group Killnet boasted that they brought down the royal website with a coordinated strike. A source said this was a denial of service attack, which saw the site bombarded with traffic. Also, Glory Rory's Ryder Sup. Europe beat USA in golf clash. The Guardian. Tory factions threaten to wreck Sunak's conference. PM's hopes of uniting party a flounder amid tax and culture war battles. Verbal abuse damaging to children, say experts. Parents who shout at their kids or call them stupid are leaving their offspring at greater risk of self-harm, drug use and ending up in jail, according to new research. Also, back to her best, Simone Biles on her way to topping the leaderboard in the women's all-round at the World Artistic Gymnastics Championships in Belgium. Isn't that amazing what she can do with her legs? I can actually do that too, and I may show you later in the show. Edwina will have to pull my heels up a bit, but it can be done. Daily Express. Hunt vows to turn the screw on the work shy. Jeremy Hunt will turn the screw on those who would rather live on benefits instead of working. The Chancellor is also set to announce a wage rise of up to £1,000 for 2 million of the lowest paid workers. Daily Mail. Mobile phones ban in schools. Mobiles will be banned from classrooms, the Education Secretary will announce. Tomorrow, Gillian Keegan will order schools to outlaw smartphones during lessons and also in breaks in a bid to end disruption and make it easier for pupils to focus. The I newspaper. Tory leaders in waiting threaten to overshadow PM's party. Rishi Sunak battles to maintain discipline as future leadership rivals jostle for position on the opening day of Tory party conference. Financial Times. Exporters face hefty EU carbon tax after Sunak weakens climate policies. Metro, easy rider, Europe's golfers triumph over USA. And Rishi, my target is winflation. PM pins election hopes on halving the rate, but no tax cuts. Daily Mirror, Beck's addicted to posh David Beckham, reflecting on his lengthy and very happy marriage to Victoria. Also, free school meals fight. Do the right thing, PM. A host of stars have backed the Mirror's call for all primary school children to get free school meals. Celebs including Brian Cox, Olivia Colman, Kate Winslet, Ed Sheeran, Nadia Hussain and Tom Kerridge urge Number 10 to end the scandal of hungry kids. Daily Star, bonkers. Freak weather has made our conkers soft. Our nuts are in crisis. Well, speak for yourself. World champs may have to bake them instead, Edwina. Yes, you'll have to bake your nuts because this year's flip-flopping weather has made conkers soft and mushy. There's one bit of good news, though. It'll make it easier to get a niner. I haven't had one of those for years. And those are your front pages. Let's get full pundit reaction now from Edwina Currie, Andy McDonald and Neil Parish. So, listen, lots of stories to get through, and I think we should start with this one, Andy. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, vows to turn the screw on the work shy. The Chancellor is going to focus on people who would rather live on benefits instead of working. I think it's upwards of 5 million people now of working age who are not active in the economy. Is he right to tackle this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to be a working country. You know, when Edwina was in government, we were an industrialised nation. We need to get back to that. We need to encourage our citizens to work and get it. I'm interested to see how he will do it. But I think the most interesting part of this article is his national insurance reform. For the first time, you can earn £1,000 a month without paying a penny of tax or national insurance. Yeah. I think that'll do fantastic things for those that may be only able to work part-time because they've got caring duties over parents or siblings, or even those that are working whilst at university. I think that will be really, really beneficial for both the working economy and, you know, the kind of wider buying economy.
Well, yes, I mean, is this a call for tough love, do you think, Edwina, from the Chancellor?
I think it's an effort has to be made when people have been out of work for a while, for whatever reason, whether it was COVID or redundancy, whatever. They lose confidence and they lose that rhythm of getting up and going to work and all the rest of it. And that needs a lot of help and encouragement. I've seen it in action at the Buxton Job Centre, who I think are wonderful. They really are. They really help, they encourage, they push. And when somebody gets a job, then they get a lot of praise and a lot of support, because then sometimes you can go on to better things. But that practical support and help is not cheap, and it needs to be done through the Department of Work and Pensions by dedicated and trained staff. If that's what he's trying to do, he will succeed.
Isn't there another way, though, Neil, which is to make working pay and to make not working not pay?
Funny enough, that's exactly what I was going to say. We've never really got it right. Universal Credit has tried to do this, where you actually, when you work, you can actually keep more of your money. The problem with the benefit system very often is when you go back into work, you very often lose your benefits, and you'll find half the time you don't actually benefit financially. And I think that is something that really needs to be fixed, so that therefore that whenever you work, if it's part-time or whatever it is, you're actually going to be better off than if you are on benefit. And if you go out of work again, you can get back into the benefit system, you see, because this is what a lot of people decide to do. They decide that it's not worth them going into work because they risk coming off the benefit system and they have a great difficulty getting back. So I think that is where, if Jeremy Hunt can actually fix that, and we should be able to do it, and then we encourage people into work. And I think Edwina's right that, you know, some people have had real trauma over it, but I think if you can get financial incentives right and stop people being worried about their benefits...
But there's another element, and that is trying to fix the NHS, which is God's own job. But a lot of the people who are out of work are waiting for treatments and care and get a new knee and whatever. And as long as doctors on £100,000 a year are on strike, then the waiting list will continue to increase.
Indeed, plus mental health, of course, which has worsened during the pandemic. The Daily Mirror, Edwina, do the right thing, Prime Minister. Celebs back Mirror campaign to give every primary school child in England free school meals.
Oh yeah, it's classic thing.
What do you
classic thing. Classic recommendation to take a large chunk of taxpayers' money and give it to people who don't need it. Yeah, if you want to look after the poorest children, look after the poorest children. But that means that what they're suggesting is giving free school meals to every child, which is nonsense. And that's the job of parents. It suggests that parents really don't matter. Parents are redundant, are irrelevant, because the state's going to do everything. That seems to me absolutely the wrong approach. I can think of much better ways of spending that money if we have to spend it.
Would it be practical to offer this in a means-tested way or not?
It is offered in a means-tested way already. There's free school meals for children in families
Are there
that
too
need
many
it.
kids that fall through the gap, though, do you think?
No.
Is that the issue?
No, I don't think so. There may be families in which the parents are choosing to spend the money on something else, but then that's a matter of both education and culture and support. But no, giving free school meals to every child that goes to school, I think, is a nonsense.
Andy, of course, we don't want kids going hungry, but is it the government's job to feed our children?
I don't. Funnily enough, I actually agree with Edwina's kind of end goal. I don't agree with the process of getting there, but I don't agree with this kind of policy. I think, why should taxpayers' money go on middle-class kids' lunch, really? I think what we do need to see is a reform and maybe an opening of access for working-class families and children to get those free school meals. And if we have to spend this money, maybe have a continuance throughout school holidays to make sure that they're being fed even when school's not on. I'd say that would be a better way to spend this money if we have to spend it. But I think the government does have a responsibility to look after those that cannot provide for themselves. But no, I don't think middle-class kids should be getting free lunch.
What about these celebrities signalling their virtue by supporting this campaign? You know, millionaire pop stars and actors saying, yeah, let's give hard-earned taxpayers' money away to middle-class families.
I just think it's a bit silly, and everyone kind of just shakes their head at it. Well, anyone reasonable just shakes their head at it. I think.
Yeah, I mean, what a brave campaign to support. I think from these celebrities.
I think, to be fair, the only one that's got a leg to stand on is Brian Cox, because his charitable foundation is fantastic with children in Scotland. Right. I have to say he can comment on it, but I don't know about the rest of them.
Right. Yeah, there you go. OK, well, and you know, Tom Kerridge is a nice guy. He's been on the show, and they're not a bad bunch, but...
they're well-meaning, but they're wrong.
They're well-meaning, but wrong. There you go. Well, look, Rishi, is he well-meaning, Neil Parish? My target is winflation. Rishi Sunak has told worried Tories he wants to cut taxes, but fighting inflation to help people in the cost of living crisis is his pre-election priority. Is he right?
I mean, I think, you know, you only have to look at food inflation still running sort of nearly 10%. All of these things are actually what the cost of living crisis is about. So, therefore, if we can actually get inflation down, then the money in your pocket's worth more, what your earnings worth more. Otherwise, you're forever chasing wage increases and fueling inflation. So he is absolutely right. What will be interesting is whether he can get it down fast enough by the election for people to actually feel a difference. You know, people have to feel better in their pockets, and at the moment they're not, because everything's costing them more. So I think you'll find he's absolutely right to target it, but I suspect he will still need to have some tax cuts as well before the next general election.
Andy?
I actually agree with you. I don't know what's happened. Earlier we were disagreeing, but now we're agreeing. But I think, you know, making food inflation stop rising is key. But the thing is, a Tesco meal deal, that used to be £3, now it's £3.40 or £3.90. That's not going to go back down. No. The lasting effect of the food inflation is still going to be there when there's an election, whether it's later this year, next year, or even 2025 if they're really pushing it. And that's the real issue for me. The damage has been done for the families across Britain that will be struggling with, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that extra 40 or 90 pence accumulates. Yeah. And the damage has already been done. So, yeah, good for him for trying to stop it. But we need to, you know, use his immense influence to, you know, do the impossible, but he can't.
OK, fascinating stuff. Listen, we've been running a poll. Is the electric car revolution running out of charge? Well, the results are in. We'll give those to you next. Plus, my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day, plus more papers. See you in 2.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Brilliant stuff. Let's do a couple of emails before I reveal the results of tonight's text poll. Are EVs, are electric cars running out of charge? This from, who is it? I'm looking for a name here. It's unnamed, but they say, Mark, I've just lost 10 grand in 12 months on my electric vehicle. I'll be going back to petrol.
How did you manage to do that?
Oh, it's astonishing, isn't it? How about this from David? Hi, Mark. With reference to cars, I don't use my 5-litre supercharged Jag Sports as much nowadays, only because my giant dog doesn't fit inside. There you go, David. Love to know what you've got. Marion says, hi, Mark. I've always had Volkswagen Passats. I bought one that was 10 years old, sold it when it was 20 years old. You won't be able to do that with battery cars. Look, thank you so much for all of your emails. We've been endorsed by Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary. In fact, I might, a little bit later, Dominic, why don't we play that one more time, but what she had to say. But anyway, this from Linda. Well done, GB News, being endorsed by Priti Patel. Well done, Mark. Aren't you due a day off soon? Oh, will you listen? Thank you so much for that. Yes, I have temporarily stepped in to the weekday slot because of events, Dear Boy events. And I will be back. I'm doing tomorrow and Tuesday from 9 till 11, so do look forward to your company then. But otherwise, it's always Friday to Sunday, 9 till 11. It's great to have your company. OK, the results are in. Has the electric car revolution run out of charge? And here we go. Let's have a look at what you have had to say. The people have spoken. It's a dud, 87.2%. It's going great, 12.8%. So a resounding majority are not having electric cars. But let me tell you, Edwina Curry. Back to me, Marky. There you go. Edwina Curry is not for turning. or you turning. OK, listen, let's now ask Edwina Curry for her nomination of Headline Hero of the Day. So who's caught your eye, Edwina?
The entire ride, a cup team, our Ryder Cup team, who have not only really beaten the Americans at their own game, as it were, but have done it in such an entertaining and exciting way. And my particular favourite was John Ram. He was the guy who did the hole-in-one on practice, which was magic, but all of them absolutely deserve to be recognised as great heroes. They have changed the face of golf. They've made it entertaining in the way that the English cricket team made cricket entertaining. And now it's about time for, I don't know, snooker and soccer to catch up.
Well, there you go. Well done. We could do that bit of good news, that little lift. So well done, Europe, in the Ryder Cup. Andy, your headline hero.
My headline hero is the late Senator Dianne Feinstein, an absolute titan of US politics, you know, a trailblazer truly for women's equality in, you know, the capital of America. You know, the first female president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, first female mayor of San Francisco, longest serving female senator ever. You know, incredible. She's sat on so many committees, chaired so many committees, has been there, you know, from the 20th to the 21st century. She's really seen that evolution, and I think, you know, the only way to truly honour her is have her on Mark Dolan tonight.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. Yeah, a towering figure of US politics.
An amazing woman. And I would add Nancy Pelosi to that as well. The American women politicians, particularly on the Democrat side, have been exceptional people. Exceptional. And they've had to be exceptional to get where they were.
Would you include Hillary in that list?
Slightly less so. Perhaps because Hillary kept going on and on about breaking the glass ceiling, whereas you could hear the voices in Michigan or Wisconsin saying, well, I don't know about you, lady, but your glass ceiling's a lot higher than mine.
That's exactly right. Well put. Neil, your headline hero of the day.
Yeah, I've actually gone for the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, because I think he took on an imploding Conservative Party. He took on a time when the country really needed a Prime Minister to stand up to the plate, and he's done it. And all right, yes, still lots of problems to sort, but I actually think, you know, he's a man with a vision, and I think he's a man who will actually turn this country round. I just hope the Conservative Party doesn't actually turn on him and implode on itself, because if they do, they will be toast, and they will absolutely deserve to be toast. So they have got one chance, really, and of course Rishi Sunak is actually more popular than the party. The polls show that quite clearly.
Yeah. The Tories are a very tainted brand. I made that point in my big opinion. However, do you think our system now has become more presidential? And do you think that the election next year will be presidential? And if so, does that help Sunak?
I think it does. It'll help Richie. I think it definitely helped Boris, without a doubt, when he stood. I think we're in danger in a way of becoming too presidential and not actually looking enough at party policies. And I think it'll be interesting if the opinion polls tighten, which they're beginning to, and if they get tighter, suddenly there'll be a spotlight put back on Labour policy, and then they'll see there's nothing there. And I think that is what's interesting. And so at the moment, the Tories have just carried on, you know, just piling the SH1T out, and the Labour Party's had an easy time. But I think Sunak, you know, Richie is changing it, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Andy, I mean, politics aside, I just wonder whether Rishi Sunak edges it in terms of the best CEO for the country. Do you think that could be a factor next year? Just, you know, Starmer versus Sunak, the face-off.
I don't imagine it'll come down to the individuals, because, let's be honest, neither of them are particularly personalities. You know, they're hardly Boris Johnson. No. You know, they're quite kind of just boring individuals.
Or Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, even Jeremy, you know, he was a character. You know, you can say that.
Correct.
I think, you know, politics has been very, very exciting over the last 6 or 7 years. It'll be good to have a bit of a boring election.
Well, but on the doors in an area like ours, which is a marginal red wall seat.
Derbyshire.
In Derbyshire. What we find is that actually it's not the personalities that matter, it's that deep feeling people have. Let me put it this way. They're sick and tired of being told that they're racist. They're sick and tired of being told that they're wrecking the planet. They're sick and tired of being told that all men are rapists and cruelty and all the rest of it. They're sick and tired of being told anything. It feels a little bit, Mark, a bit like before the 2016 referendum, when there was a kind of a visceral feeling that an awful lot of ordinary people are being ignored. And what we're finding I don't know whether it's showing up in the polls or not, but what we're finding is that they don't like the way the Labour Party is doing it, and they are much more likely now to be Tory.
Well, there you go. Listen, what a thrill to have Edwina in the studio. Edwina, always a treat to have you. Brilliant first job as well from Andy McDonald, by the way, as our pundit, and the marvellous Neil Parish. Folks, thank you for your company. It's been a really busy weekend. Let's be honest, it's been a busy 5 or 6 days. I will be covering 9 till 11 on Monday and Tuesday, so I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Well done, Mark, by the way. Headliners is next.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It stays mixed over the next few days. We'll see some rain at times, but there will be some drier and brighter intervals. Temperatures generally on the warm side for the time of year. At the moment, low pressure generally dominates the weather pattern, but this area of high pressure starts to move in towards the middle of the week across the south. Across the south this evening, though, quite a cloudy picture, outbreaks of patchy rain at times too, and that continues overnight. Some low cloud, mist and murk developing here. Further north, generally drier, some clear spells for Northern Ireland, Scotland, but turning windy across the Highlands with showers here. And temperatures for most generally staying in double figures. A warm start to the day across southern counties of England and Wales. Quite cloudy here, though, with patchy rain and drizzle. And then through the day, we'll see cloud amounts increase across England and Wales. Some heavy rain developing. Bright skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland through the day, but still some scattered showers. Staying windy across the northwest of Scotland. Temperatures high teens to low 20s, 22 or 23 possible towards the far southeast where we see any sunshine. Into Tuesday, we've got early rain clearing southeastwards, and then it's a bright day with sunny spells and scattered showers. Showers moving in quite quickly across the northern half of the UK on that brisk westerly breeze. Best for the sunshine across southern areas. Temperatures a little lower, but staying around average over the next few days before increasing further towards the weekend. See you soon.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. A promise to increase efforts to stop illegal migrants from entering the country has been made at the Conservative Party conference. That's as the latest figures show more than 537 people were intercepted trying to cross the Channel yesterday. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, told the party faithful he's working with international allies to stop the boats.
I've written to all of our ambassadors, all of our high commissioners, and I've instructed each and every one of them to do even more work with the countries in which they represent the UK to help stop the abhorrent trafficking of human lives across the English Channel. Be in no doubt at all, our diplomats will redouble their effort to bring an end to this terrible, terrible injustice.
Earlier, the Tory party chairman used his opening address to take a swipe at Labour.
I have these available at the Conservative shop outside for just £16.99, also online.
Waving flip-flops featuring Sir Keir Starmer's face, Greg Hands mocked the Labour leader, suggesting he doesn't have a clear position on issues affecting the country. His comments